chosen ones. There's a conversation happening about you right now that you're not even aware of. Someone is sitting across from another person, frustrated beyond belief, saying those exact words. They just don't give a damn about anybody anymore. But here's the twist that's about to shatter everything you thought you knew about your own transformation. This isn't the story of how you became cold. This is the story of how you became untouchable. This is the story of how the universe engineered your apparent indifference as the ultimate weapon against forces that were designed to keep you small. And by the time we reach the end of this revelation, you'll understand that every single person complaining about your coldness is actually a character in a divine script that was written specifically to forge you into the spiritual warrior you were always meant to become. Right now, as these words hit your consciousness, there are people analyzing your silence like it's a riddle they need to solve. They're dissecting your absence from their drama, like archaeologists examining ancient ruins. They're trying to decode the mystery of how someone who used to care so deeply about everyone and everything suddenly developed what appears to be supernatural immunity to their chaos. But what they don't realize, what they can't realize, is that your transformation wasn't random. It wasn't even your choice. It was a cosmic intervention disguised as emotional evolution, and every single moment that led to this point was orchestrated by forces beyond their comprehension. Let me paint the picture of what's really happening behind the scenes. There are group chats buzzing with your name. There are phone calls where your behavior is being analyzed like you're some kind of psychological phenomenon. There are people telling stories about how you used to be so caring, so available, so invested in everyone's problems, and now you've become this untouchable entity who seems to have developed immunity to their emotional manipulation. But here's what's building in the background that they can't see yet. This is just the beginning of a revelation that's going to completely reshape how they understand power, boundaries, and spiritual warfare. The first clue that something bigger was happening came when you stopped responding to certain people with the same urgency you once had. It probably felt like nothing at the time, just a delayed response, just a moment where you prioritized something else, just a brief pause before you jumped back into someone else's emergency. But that pause was the universe testing whether you were ready for the next level of your spiritual evolution. That pause was your consciousness learning to protect itself. That pause was the first crack in the dam that was about to unleash a flood of divine boundaries. What you didn't realize at the time was that you were entering what spiritual warriors call hustle mode, a period where the universe demands laser focus on your mission. The results were starting to show, but they required you to ignore the funny stuff, as the saying goes. While you were locked into this frequency of achievement, the people accustomed to unlimited access to your time were experiencing withdrawal symptoms. Then came the second sign. People started noticing that you weren't checking in on them the way you used to. The daily texts stopped coming. The regular calls became irregular. Your emotional availability became selective instead of automatic. And this is where the story gets interesting, because the people who noticed weren't the ones who reciprocated that energy. They weren't the ones who checked on you. They were the energy vampires who had become addicted to your attention, and suddenly their supply was being cut off without warning or explanation. But here's where the plot thickens in ways they never anticipated. While they were busy creating narratives about your coldness, you were actually going through your own inner transformation that had nothing to do with them. You've developed an immunity to love bombing that's absolutely supernatural. Remember those people who would shower you with praise and attention when they needed something, then disappear when they got what they wanted? Your new spiritual operating system can detect these patterns before they even fully form. They're also discovering that their attempts to insult you or get negative reactions are equally ineffective. You've learned to absorb their attempts at emotional terrorism and keep moving toward your goals without breaking stride. This isn't numbness, it's mastery. Now here's where the narrative takes a turn that none of them saw coming. While they were busy complaining about your apparent lack of caring, something else was happening in your life that they couldn't see. You were entering what spiritual warriors call the hustle season, a period of intense focus where the universe demands that you eliminate every distraction that isn't aligned with your highest purpose. You weren't becoming cold, you were becoming laser-focused. You weren't losing your heart, you were learning to protect it from those who would exploit its generosity. The most fascinating part of your transformation is how you've become absolutely unreadable to people who used to think they had you figured out. There are individuals who are literally trying to decode your social media posts, like they're ancient hieroglyphs, searching for hidden meanings that simply don't exist. They're convinced that your silence is about them, that your posts are directed at them, that every move you make is somehow connected to your history with them. Meanwhile, there's someone from your past who is trying to convince others that you're sitting somewhere heartbroken, that you're posting less because you're distraught, that your apparent peace is just a front hiding your pain. But there's always someone in these conversations who keeps bringing them back to reality. I think they're just living their life. Not everything has to do with you. The truth they can't accept is even more powerful than their delusions. Some of you are actually in new relationships, building new connections, or simply enjoying the peace that comes with removing toxic people from your environment. Your glow-up isn't about them, it's about you finally having the space to flourish without their negative energy draining your light. The people talking about your transformation don't understand that they're witnessing the birth of someone who has learned to value their own energy more than other people's comfort with unlimited access to that energy. They're seeing someone who has developed what appears to be supernatural ability to remain unaffected by drama, manipulation, and emotional terrorism. What they're calling coldness is actually a spiritual upgrade that most people never achieve because they're too addicted to being liked, too desperate to be understood, too afraid of being called selfish. But there's something even more powerful happening that they're completely blind to. You're naturally attracting secret admirers while simultaneously repelling the wrong people. The very traits they're criticizing, your selectivity, your boundaries, your refusal to engage with drama, are magnetic to individuals who operate on your new frequency. People who value peace are drawn to your peaceful energy. People who respect boundaries are attracted to your boundary setting. People who understand the importance of protecting their energy recognize and appreciate your energy management skills. There's actually someone in your environment right now who has been watching your transformation with admiration rather than criticism. While others are complaining about your coldness, this person is thinking about how attractive your self-respect is. While others are calling you difficult, this person is recognizing your standards as exactly what they've been looking for. The very qualities that are driving the wrong people away are drawing the right people closer. Meanwhile, the people who are upset about your boundaries have inadvertently started advertising your immunity to manipulation. Every story they tell about how cold you've become is actually a testimonial to your strength. Every complaint about how you don't care anymore is actually evidence of your spiritual evolution. They think they're damaging your reputation, but they're actually creating a reputation that attracts people who are looking for someone who can't be manipulated, controlled, or emotionally hijacked. This is where the story gets particularly satisfying. Some of these people are starting to realize that their campaign against your character is backfiring. The more they talk about how you've changed, the more curious people become about what kind of transformation could create such a strong reaction. The more they emphasize your indifference to their drama, the more attractive that indifference becomes to people who are tired of being around drama creators. And here's what's building toward a revelation that will shatter their entire narrative. While they've been investing time and energy in talking about you, analyzing you, and trying to understand your transformation, you've been busy building something that's about to make all their opinions completely irrelevant. Success has a way of silencing critics, and the universe is preparing to reward your spiritual discipline with tangible evidence that choosing peace over popularity was the right decision. Now here's the twist that's building towards something they never anticipated. Every person complaining about your indifference is about to discover that your absence from their chaos has consequences they never considered. The drama they were used to bringing to you is now their responsibility to handle alone. The emotional regulation they expected you to provide is now something they have to learn for themselves. The support system they took for granted is now a void they have to figure out how to fill. There's someone specific in this story, let's call them the catalyst, who played a crucial role in pushing you to this point of divine detachment. This person thought they could use emotional manipulation, silent treatment, or withdrawal of attention to control your behavior. They thought they could train you to chase them, beg for their approval, fight for your place in their life. They had no idea they were actually training you to become comfortable with their absence. The catalyst is particularly triggered right now because their strategy backfired in ways they never imagined possible. They expected you to crack under the pressure of their disapproval. They anticipated that you would eventually break down and come crawling back, willing to accept less than you deserve just to restore peace. Instead, you did something that completely shattered their understanding of how this game was supposed to be played. You accepted their withdrawal as a gift and used it as an opportunity to level up. While the catalyst was busy trying to punish you with their absence, you were busy discovering how peaceful life could be without their constant need for drama and attention. While they were expecting you to suffer, you were learning to thrive. While they were waiting for you to beg for another chance, you were moving forward and building something better. And now they're faced with a reality they never prepared for. You genuinely don't need them anymore. Here's where the story reveals another layer that makes your transformation even more powerful. You've developed the ability to make hard decisions that most people don't have the courage to make. Some of you are literally in leadership positions where you had to cut people off for business reasons. Maybe someone was costing your company money, creating workplace drama, or undermining team productivity. You made the executive decision that many leaders are too weak to make, prioritizing the health of your organization over someone's feelings about being held accountable. This is where your reputation for being ruthless actually serves you. People know you're not someone who makes empty threats or gives unlimited chances. When you set a boundary, they understand it's non-negotiable. When you make a decision, they recognize it's final. This level of decisiveness is rare in a world full of people who will compromise their standards to avoid conflict, and it's created a respect for your authority that runs deeper than their complaints about your coldness. But the story gets even more complex because the catalyst isn't working alone. There's an entire network of people who are benefiting from your previous pattern of putting everyone else's needs before your own. These are the people who were used to having unlimited access to your time, energy, and resources without having to reciprocate. They're the ones who treated your kindness like weakness and your availability like an obligation. And they're all starting to panic because they're realizing that their free ride is over. What makes this particularly interesting is how your transformation has exposed the difference between people who genuinely cared about you versus those who only cared about what you could provide. The ones who are upset about your boundaries are revealing their true motives. They're not mourning the loss of your friendship, they're mourning the loss of your services. They're not hurt by your absence, they're inconvenienced by the lack of access to whatever you were giving them that they can't easily replace. There's someone in this network who keeps trying to convince others that you used them in some way, but this narrative falls apart under scrutiny because you're the one who had things going for you. You're the one with skills, connections, resources, and opportunities. If anything, you slowed down to help people who were struggling to keep up, and they want to rewrite that generosity as exploitation because it makes them feel better about losing access to it. The most revealing aspect of their complaints is how they expose their own character. They're essentially admitting that they were only in relationship with you because of what they could extract from your presence in their lives. The moment you stopped being useful to them in the ways they expected, they started attacking your character. This tells you everything you need to know about what they actually valued about your connection. What makes this story truly fascinating is how your transformation has created a ripple effect that's exposing the true nature of every relationship in your life. The people who are upset about your boundaries are revealing that they preferred you when you had no boundaries. The ones complaining about your selectivity are admitting they benefited from your lack of discrimination. The ones calling you cold are confessing that they were used to being able to manipulate your emotions whenever it served their purposes. There's a specific pattern emerging in how people are responding to your evolution, and it's revealing everything about their character. The secure, healthy people in your life are either celebrating your growth or simply accepting it without drama. They understand that boundaries are healthy, that protecting your peace is wise, that being selective with your energy is mature, They're not threatened by your transformation because they weren't depending on your dysfunction to meet their needs. But then there are the others, the ones who are having emotional breakdowns about your coldness, who are desperately trying to pull you back into old patterns, who are creating elaborate theories about your motivations. These people are exposing that they were never really invested in your well-being. They were invested in your availability. They weren't concerned with your happiness. They were concerned with your usefulness to them. What's particularly revealing is how they're trying to gaslight you about your own transformation. They're telling you that you're different now, that you've changed, that you're not the person you used to be, as if change is inherently wrong. They're trying to convince you that your boundaries are excessive, that your standards are too high, that your peace is somehow selfish. This is the language of people who benefited from your lack of boundaries and are now being forced to deal with the consequences of treating you poorly. There's a particular conversation happening right now where someone is trying to convince others that you've become arrogant, that success has changed you, that you've forgotten where you came from. But there's another person in that conversation. Let's call them the truth teller, who keeps interrupting their narrative with reality checks. I don't think they care what you're saying about them, the truth teller keeps pointing out. I think they're just living their life. And this simple observation is driving the complainers absolutely insane because it highlights the futility of their entire campaign against your peace. The truth teller represents something crucial in this story. There are people who understand what you've become and respect it. There are observers who recognize that your apparent indifference is actually strength, that your selectivity is actually wisdom, that your boundaries are actually self-respect in action. These people aren't threatened by your evolution because they're secure enough in themselves to appreciate it. Here's what's building toward a major revelation. The truth teller has been having private conversations with others who know you, and they're sharing a perspective that's completely different from the complainer's narrative. They're talking about how focused you've become, how productive you've been, how peaceful you seem. They're noticing that you're booked and busy in the best possible way, not stressed or overwhelmed, but purposefully engaged with things that actually matter to you. This alternative narrative is spreading quietly while the complainers are making noise, and it's creating a contrast that makes the complainers look increasingly petty and obsessive. While they're analyzing your every move, looking for signs that you're secretly miserable without them, the truth teller is pointing out evidence that you're thriving specifically because you've removed their drama from your life. Meanwhile, there are others who are so obsessed with your transformation that they're creating elaborate theories about your motivations. They're analyzing your social media posts, looking for hidden meanings. They're reading into every action or lack of action, like you're sending them coded messages. They're so convinced that everything you do has something to do with them, that they can't see the obvious truth. You've simply moved on with your life. Now this is the revelation that's going to change everything. Your journey to this point of divine indifference was never about becoming cold or heartless. It was about developing spiritual immunity to emotional manipulation. Every person who pushed you to this point was actually serving as a cosmic trainer, teaching you to become unshakable in your sense of self-worth. The universe has been running you through an intensive course in spiritual warfare disguised as relationship drama. Every energy vampire who drained you taught you to value your energy. Every manipulator who tried to guilt you taught you to trust your intuition over their narratives. Every person who treated your kindness like weakness taught you to be strategic with your compassion. Every situation that made you question your own sanity taught you to rely on your inner knowing over external validation. And now you've reached a level of consciousness where you can see the game being played around you without feeling compelled to participate. You can observe people's attempts at manipulation without getting emotionally hijacked. You can witness drama unfolding without feeling responsible for fixing it. You can hear criticism without automatically assuming it must be true. This is what mastery looks like, and it's terrifying to people who are still trapped in cycles of codependency and people-pleasing. The catalyst is about to make their final move in this cosmic chess game, but they don't realize they're already in checkmate. They're planning some kind of grand gesture, some dramatic attempt to force you back into their orbit. Maybe it's going to be a fake emergency. Maybe it's going to be an attempt at reconciliation that's really just another manipulation tactic. Maybe it's going to be a public attack designed to damage your reputation. But whatever it is, they're about to discover that you've become immune to their entire playbook. This is the moment when everything comes together in a revelation that reshapes the entire story. The catalyst makes their move, expecting the old version of you to respond with predictable patterns of guilt, fear, or anger. Instead, they encounter something they never anticipated: complete and total indifference. Not the kind of indifference that's trying to prove a point, not the kind that's hiding hurt feelings, but genuine, authentic indifference born from the recognition that their opinion of you is irrelevant to your mission in life. The response they get, or more accurately, the lack of response, shatters their entire understanding of their power over you. They realize that all their strategies, all their manipulation tactics, all their attempts to make you feel guilty or sorry or responsible for their emotions are bouncing off you like arrows off armor. They're forced to confront the fact that they no longer have the ability to disturb your peace, and this realization drives them to escalate their behavior in increasingly desperate ways. The more dramatically they behave, the more obvious it becomes to everyone watching that they're the problem, not you. The more they try to convince others that you're cold and heartless, the more people start questioning why they're so obsessed with someone who allegedly doesn't matter to them. The more energy they invest in trying to get your attention, the more apparent it becomes that they're the ones who can't let go. Meanwhile, something beautiful is happening in your life that serves as the ultimate contrast to their chaos. Opportunities are opening up that couldn't have existed while you were still entangled in their drama. People are showing up who appreciate your energy instead of trying to drain it. Situations are aligning that require the exact level of focus and emotional stability you've developed through this process. The universe is rewarding your spiritual discipline with tangible evidence that you made the right choices. The obsidian inner order is where you can process difficult realizations together, every week on our Zoom calls with people who understand that some of life's most painful experiences become our greatest teachers. We don't encourage bitterness, we cultivate wisdom. Your ability to see people's true character is a gift that will protect you from future betrayals. Your willingness to forgive while maintaining boundaries shows strength, not weakness. Your wisdom was earned through experience, not given freely. Connect with people who value truth. Join the Obsidian Inner Order. Link in the description. Romzer, the people who were complaining about your coldness start experiencing the consequences of their own actions. The energy they were investing in criticizing you instead of improving themselves starts showing up as stagnation in their own lives. The drama they were trying to pull you into starts consuming them instead. The chaos they were creating in your life returns to them amplified. The truth teller in those conversations starts speaking up more boldly, pointing out patterns that everyone else was too invested in the drama to notice. Have you ever considered, they say, that maybe they're not responding because they're too busy building something amazing? Have you thought about the fact that their silence might be protecting them from exactly this kind of negativity? What if their indifference isn't cruelty? What if it's wisdom? And this is when the entire narrative flips. The people who were positioning themselves as victims of your coldness are forced to confront the possibility that they were actually obstacles to your growth. The ones who were claiming you used them have to face the fact that they were trying to use you. The ones who were saying you didn't care about them have to acknowledge that they never genuinely cared about your well-being either. They only cared about what you could do for them. But the most powerful revelation is happening within you. You're realizing that your journey to this point of divine indifference wasn't a descent into coldness, it was an ascension into clarity. You weren't losing your humanity, you were discovering your divinity. You weren't becoming heartless, you were learning to use your heart strategically instead of carelessly. Every person who complained about your transformation was actually testifying to your power without realizing it. The same people who were calling you cold are now secretly watching your life unfold with a mixture of admiration and envy. They're seeing the peace you've created, the success you're building, the healthy relationships you're cultivating, and they're starting to understand what they lost when they pushed you away. The catalyst is facing a moment of reckoning, where they have to choose between continuing their campaign against your peace or accepting reality and moving on with their life. Most people in their position choose to double down on their delusions rather than face the truth about their own behavior, but a few rare ones experience genuine awakening. Either way, their choice no longer has the power to affect your trajectory because you've become immune to their influence. There's something poetic about how the story resolves. The very people who pushed you to develop divine indifference become the first witnesses to its power. They created the conditions that forced you to evolve beyond their ability to manipulate, and now they're stuck dealing with someone who has transcended the game they were trying to play. They wanted to see you broken, and instead they're witnessing you unbreakable. The conversations about your coldness start shifting as people begin to recognize that what they were interpreting as lack of caring was actually the highest form of self-care. Your boundaries weren't walls keeping people out. They were filters ensuring that only the right energy could reach you. Your selectivity wasn't arrogance, it was wisdom choosing quality over quantity in every area of your life. Remember that conversation we opened with? Someone sitting across from another person, frustrated beyond belief, saying they just don't give a damn about anybody anymore. That conversation is still happening, but now there's a new participant in it, someone who understands what you've become and isn't threatened by it. Maybe, this new voice suggests, the problem isn't that they don't care. Maybe the problem is that we got used to them caring about us more than they cared about themselves. Maybe what we're calling coldness is actually what healthy boundaries look like. Maybe what we're calling indifference is actually what self-respect sounds like when it finally finds its voice. The original complainers don't want to hear this perspective because it requires them to examine their own behavior, their own entitlement, their own inability to function without someone else managing their emotions. But the seed of truth has been planted, and truth has a way of growing even in hostile soil. Meanwhile, you're living in the reality that this entire journey was designed to create. You've become someone who can love deeply without losing yourself. You can support others without depleting yourself. You can maintain relationships without sacrificing your peace. You can care about people without making their problems your emergency. You've achieved the seemingly impossible balance between compassion and self-preservation. The people who are still complaining about your transformation are becoming increasingly irrelevant to your story. They're stuck in the past, trying to understand why you changed, while you're focused on the future you're building with your newfound freedom. They're invested in maintaining narratives about who you used to be, while you're busy becoming who you were always meant to be. The ultimate truth that emerges from this entire saga is that your journey to divine indifference was never really about the people who pushed you to this point. They were just supporting characters in a story that was always about your own spiritual evolution. They served their purpose by creating the conditions that forced you to choose between maintaining false peace through self-sacrifice or creating authentic peace through healthy boundaries. Every person who complained about your coldness was actually a mirror showing you patterns you needed to break. Every situation that made you question your own caring nature was actually testing whether you were ready to care about yourself with the same intensity you had been caring about others. Every moment of apparent indifference was actually a moment of profound self-awareness disguised as emotional detachment. The conversations about how much you don't care anymore will continue for a while, but they're already losing their power because the people having them are starting to realize that their opinions about your boundaries are irrelevant to your life. You've created a reality where other people's approval is nice to have, but not necessary for your peace. You've built a existence where other people's understanding of your choices is welcomed, but not required for your confidence. This is what victory looks like in spiritual warfare, not the defeat of your enemies, but the transcendence of their ability to affect your inner state. Not the silencing of criticism, but the development of immunity to its impact. Not the elimination of drama from your environment, but the cultivation of peace that remains unshaken regardless of what's happening around you. The chosen ones who recognize themselves in this story are the ones who have learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone else's dysfunction. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is stop caring about people who have demonstrated they don't genuinely care about you. Sometimes the path to true compassion leads through a period of apparent coldness that's actually spiritual purification in disguise. Your journey to this point of divine indifference has equipped you with powers that most people never develop. The ability to remain calm in chaos, the strength to maintain boundaries under pressure, the wisdom to distinguish between genuine need and manipulative demand, the discernment to recognize when someone's presence in your life is more costly than beneficial. The people talking about how much you don't care anymore are actually creating a testimony to your transformation that will inspire other chosen ones who are ready to make similar changes in their own lives. They're inadvertently advertising your immunity to their manipulation, your freedom from their approval, your independence from their validation. They're becoming unwitting evangelists for the power of healthy boundaries and spiritual self-respect. This is your story, chosen one. This is how the universe forged you into someone who could love without losing yourself, care without depleting yourself, and maintain peace without compromising yourself. The people who pushed you to this point of divine indifference gave you the greatest gift they could have given, even though they never intended it as a gift. They forced you to discover that your worth was never dependent on their approval, your peace was never contingent on their presence, and your power was always independent of their permission. Keep protecting that peace, keep maintaining those boundaries, keep honoring that divine indifference that looks like coldness to those who are benefiting from your lack of limits. You've become exactly who you needed to become, and the universe is about to show you why every moment of this journey was absolutely necessary for what's coming next in your story.